And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. Joining me in the studio is my good friend, Representative Ken Pendergraft. Ken, welcome to the program.
I am not a bombastic twit.
No, but there are lots of them around.
Okay, because I've been either one independently, but I don't know that I've ever been called them the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're a red coat, which of course you're not, I mean, there's several insults we could throw your way. I mean, we've had lots of examples of that during this legislative session, and so I kind of just make a list of all the great insults that I could throw their way.
We live in different worlds, David.
We do. We do.
We do. I listen to you, and even down the session, I find time to just kind of keep track of where you're at, and it is so surreal to be down there for that intense couple of months. I wake up about 5:30, and I generally start reading, and have to be over there at the Capitol. Maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock. It depends, and have some sort of a meeting beforehand, and the session starts at 10, and there's usually about 5 minutes in between, if that. And then at lunchtime, there's another meeting, and I think most of the time I didn't get a chance to eat. You rush out of that, back down onto the floor, and you might be there until 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. And then you have another meeting after that, and then caucus after that. You get to bed about 11:30 or so, and your mind is spinning.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, Wyoming's unique in the sense that we don't have a full-time legislature. And I guess unique is probably the wrong word, because there are some other states. Texas, they meet every other year.
I would argue that.
Okay.
We have a full-time legislature. We're just not paid that way.
Fair enough. Just a quick recap. In Wyoming, the legislature can meet 60 days every 2 years. So it's broken up 40 days for a general session and then 20 days for a budget session. And the one we just went through was the 40-day general session. And that's a lot of stuff to cram into 40 days.
It is, and it is so intense. I've said before, the friendships that you develop down there on that floor and the cooperation between people are not that different from what you do in combat. Maybe that sounds a little bit wild to somebody, but having done both, there are a lot of similarities, and it's just the intense amount of time and where your focus is. And it's been surreal having been home the last few days. It's like I had to think about, now where's David's house? It's a totally different shift, and you go back and you start seeing people. I know that person. It's a strange position.
Well, one big question I've been wanting to ask you, and I'm sure I kind of alluded to it during the session, but all of the news reports we heard is this is the most divisive place we've ever seen, and this is the worst session. Was that your experience?
Not at all. In fact, I think this was quite a bit less divisive in many ways than the last couple of years have been. It was really interesting to watch people like Steve Harshman and Lloyd Larson and Bob Nicholas just feel, I wouldn't say useless, but they had no influence, and nothing that they brought to the table worked. I mean, Steve tried frantically. But one of the things, he's got some ideas that I think have some merit, and we need to look into them. But he'd bring it like as a second or third,
Third
reading amendment to some bill that was not really related. They're both taxes, and he wants to completely change the tax structure. And, we have committees, we have interims, we have all these things for a reason that allows us to actually think about the repercussions of these, because these are big changes. And he went ahead and pulled this stuff. But he's a person. There's a part of Steve that I like. We both enjoy football, and we've had some nice chats about that. But in my view, he's bound and determined to get his own legacy, even if it is a carved mountain or something.
Right. Well, I think that this was a very different session for him, in that the way that business had been done, in years past, well, probably for the last 30, 40, 50 years, I don't even know how many, is that you could bring a major change to, the property tax structure, or, just pick any department in government, and you could bring it at the last minute. And so, for example, the Amendment A, that's now the constitutional amendment that we just passed, that was brought on a third reading amendment to a bill that really didn't have anything to do with what they turned it into. And now it's part of the Constitution. So that was just kind of normal operating procedure when the Redcoats were in power, but not so much.
Part of it isn't, and it is and it isn't. The way that, of course, came about is there was a lot of backroom talking, a lot of, they'd already hashed this out amongst themselves. Well, when Senate File 69, the property tax bill, was on the floor, Ken Clausen got a hold of it and started turning it down a different direction. And that direction deserves some consideration, a little bit of merit. It was obvious that some of them had worked there. But we hadn't been involved in that discussion, and we were convinced that the Senate was going to have none of it. And so even though it may have some merit, we were wasting our time. And so Tony Locke and myself, Jamie Lean, I don't remember which reading it was, second or third reading, there were 21 amendments out there. And we endured about 12 or 15 before I got up and started the trend. We passed our 3 amendments, put the bill back similar to how it had come out of the Senate. We felt that was the only way it had of getting anything done. And they were livid. But how come you didn't include us in this? Because I just said, we came up with another idea. This is what we're going to do. And the votes, they didn't have the votes to change it. Exactly the same maneuvers they used to use on us. But, oh, man, it was awful. J.T. Larson was standing there. How come I wasn't invited?
Because you're a redcoat.
Anyway.
All right. So
I wanted to just
go ahead.
touch on something. One of the things that we're trying to do, the team in appropriations, is for years, we have what they call the golden rod.
You can hold it up for the camera so people can see what you're looking at.
It's kind of like a checking account statement. You really can't see anything. And even if you could, you wouldn't know what it meant because it's very complicated. There are a lot of accounts on there, and I think they're used in large part like a shell game, so they can move money around, and it's really hard to follow and see exactly what they're doing. So one of the things that we're trying to do is twofold, is get rid of some of these accounts, streamline the process, and then the other one is to change the spending policy. Well, these are things specifically that Steve Harshman had a great deal of input in establishing. So to be honest, and to be kind of fair to him, I know that's hard for some people to do, but I try to be empathetic. And I think here's a guy that spent the last 20 years setting things up. This is his baby, and we're coming in, these newcomers, and in a matter of a couple of years, we're tearing it all down. And that has got to be desperate. That's got to put him in a state like that. Um, I don't necessarily blame him, but I'm not going to back off because I believe I'm doing the right thing.
Well, and I think the things that you're trying to tear down are the 600 coffee cans and mystery accounts that exist that really very few people know anything about. One good example, I think, was and you could probably tell me which account this was, but there was $19 million that was in this account that we really hadn't used for a couple of years, and we really weren't doing anything with. But here it is, $19 million, a tremendous amount of money, just sitting in this account by itself.
You might be thinking of, they call it SFPRA, School Foundation Program Reserve Account. It is still used at times, but it's kind of like a little bit of a dead end. And right now, it's got about $88 million.
Oh, okay.
$88.7 million sitting in there. And once you understand, Lloyd Larson describes it like an old boiler. Is once you understand all the valves and how everything works, you can manipulate it to do a lot of different things. And we're not really into manipulation. We're into transparency. So that if you're a new legislator and you're out there sitting on the floor and you're asked to vote on a particular issue, you can understand how it affects everything else. Right now, that's very, very difficult. And to be honest, there are probably only about a half dozen people in the state that actually understand how this works. And that's just wrong.
Yeah. I really think, and one of my big complaints for a long time, and this is an overly simplistic view, but we ought to be able to look at a couple sheets of paper and say, all right, this is where all of our money goes. And that is not the case with the Wyoming finances. Well,
not even close.
I want to shift gears real quick because you got a really important piece of legislation passed, and it was the only one that you got through, and it's been signed by the governor. And I know that this is a personal piece of legislation for you, so I'll just give you the floor, and why don't you tell us about it?
Okay, a little bit of background. My former son-in-law years ago molested his niece. When it came out, it ended up breaking up the marriage. And he went to jail for a while. He got out, was on probation, and was fighting for custody of his children, my daughter's children, my grandkids. And you can imagine how we felt about that. Child molestation is an awful thing.
Heinous crime.
It's not just that, but it's. I don't like to give anybody an excuse. It's a disease, but people who are enamored with this behavior, I'll put it that way, very seldom change.
Yes. The recidivism rate is huge.
Yeah, we understand that because we've been involved with this in several cases as a pastor over the years. I've been involved in a number of issues. So this was a tough one for us. We also had it in my wife's family. There was some of this stuff going on, and that's neither here nor there. But it was very, very frustrating. And at one point, he was seeking visitation for the kids, unsupervised visitation.
What?
Well, to be technical about it, he didn't actually get that, but the person who was supposed to be supervising was not supervising. Long story short, my daughter had to surrender her children to him, and he then did take advantage of the circumstances and molested my granddaughter.
Oh, my God.
And at that time, he was going through all of the motions, going through the counseling, whatnot. He passed 3 lie detector tests. All kinds of stuff went on. And he was coming to the point where he would have paid his time, he'd paid all of his dues, and he was fighting to get custody of the kids.
Oh, my God.
And that's how we felt about it. Well, after he did this to my granddaughter, we just decided, we've got to do something. And so I talked to the judge involved in the case and learned a little bit about how they make decisions. And there's a chunk of legislature, a chunk of the green books that give, I think there's probably 10, 11 different ideas about what is in the best interest of the child. How does a judge look at that? It says nothing about sex offense. So I went to LSO, and Brian Fuller is one of the attorneys down there. It's funny because he's one of those people I never really thought I would like. But I've grown to like and respect him, and he did a marvelous job of writing a very simple piece of legislation. But it just adds to the list that a judge considers if one of the parents is a sex offender. It's not in the best interest of the child. They call it a rebuttable presumption, meaning there are certain circumstances a judge could consider doing that, so it's not a tight absolute. But for general purposes, it's presumed that if you're a sex offender, you're not going to have unsolicited, unaccompanied visitation, or you're not going to take the kids.
Well, this is one of those examples of it. You would think we would have a law against that, and I mean, you would think that the statute would say, listen, if you're a sex offender, you can't have unsupervised.
A lot
visits.
is left to the judges. Like I said, I went to the judge after this law was written, and I showed it to her, and she said, "This is terrific." She said, "This really helps. It just gives you something. If you have a hunch and there's nothing in statute, then it's a little bit difficult to do anything about it. But with this in the statute, if I have a hunch, there's something I can hang that on, and there's something I can do about it." I also went to 2 of the Supreme Court justices because I happened to be down there among them, and I handed them the thing, and they said, "This is terrific. That's what it is." It sailed through the House committee, Judicial Committee. It did get changed slightly there by Ken Chestick. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, big shocker.
A lot of these people, I think, feel like they have to leave their mark on something. It goes over to the Senate and Senate Judiciary, and I'm thinking, these guys, because the Senate, everything we sent over there, they would not, everything that came to them, they were kind of had this attitude, it's not ready for prime time. We got to fix it or kill it. And there was a lot of that going on. And of all things to occur, Jared Olson looked at the thing, and I'd shown it to him before and talked to him about it. And they started to kind of pick at it a little bit. And Jared basically shut him down. He said, "No, this is a good bill. We don't need to change it." And walked away. And I was grateful for that. I told him that. And it got passed, had a ceremony with the governor, and had him sign it. He gave me an extra pen so I can give one to my granddaughter. And it was pretty special because it was a horrible thing to have had happen, obviously. But to be able to say we can do something about it, or to be in a position where I could do something about it and maybe help somebody else. And lo and behold, as this thing started going through the works, I got a phone call from a gal living there in Cheyenne who was going through the same thing. And she followed it very closely. She talked to me almost every day about where's it at, how's this thing working. Her sister was an attorney, and her sister came to the bill signing and spoke at the bill signing. And it just felt like we're doing some good here. The governor, when he signed it, he said, "This is a very good piece of legislation." In fact, he knew of another case or two in the state that this would affect. So,
well, you made a difference.
Felt pretty good.
Excellent. Well done, Ken. By the way, what ended up happening with your granddaughter's custody visitation?
My daughter was awarded full custody. My former son-in-law is still in jail, and I hope he'll be there for quite a while, but he'll probably be out in a year or two.
Excellent. Well, good job, Ken. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Representative Ken Pendergraft. We're going to talk about, were there more national issues in the legislature? We'll do that in just a second. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to the live program every Tuesday through Thursday. Well, that's right now during the legislative session, but coming soon, Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. From high above, all the idiots in the Wyoming mainstream media and propagandists masquerading as news, this is Cowboy State Politics. I'm your host, David Iverson, and I'm joined today by my friend, Representative Ken Pendergraft. So, Ken, a lot of the coverage we saw in the lamestream media said that, all these bills, they're just national issues. And in fact, in the Wyoming Turkey Vulture this morning, there's a piece that evidently somebody had a visit with the governor, press conference or whatever, and he said he's very disappointed that there were so many national issues that were brought up during this legislative session. I was there for the whole thing, and I didn't really see a lot of national issues that were disconnected from what people care about in the state. But tell me, did you guys set out to say, hey, we're going to cover national issues and that's it? Or how did that work? Was there a conversation there? Tell me about it.
Yeah, we are, by definition, representatives. If you're going to represent somebody, you ought to have some sort of an inkling, an understanding, and what are they interested in? So we went out, a lot of door-to-door, and a lot of knocking on doors and talking to people and listening to them. We did some polling, and the answers were remarkably the same. And the reason they were focused on what some would call national issues is because that's where the people are focused. They go home, they watch Fox News. I can't tell you how many emails I'm getting lately that says, how come Wyoming doesn't have a Doge?
We do. It just takes a while.
Yeah. ESG. If we bring that up, we bring up DEI, these things, this doesn't happen in Wyoming. All the election integrity, every time something was brought up, about election integrity, that's not a problem in Wyoming. There's no issues with ours. Yeah, we've talked about that quite a bit. There are issues in Wyoming too, in all of these things. So we listened to the people. We brought the things that they were concerned about to the floor, and we passed them. We didn't take the whole 10 days. We did it in 8, and we proved that we could do the work of the people. There are statewide issues that, of course, we're all in. It's kind of, there are people who are really involved in statewide politics, and they understand the issues and what's going on there. And there's kind of an elitist attitude among them, especially if they happen to be an elected legislator. And then there are, Joe Schmo out on the street has no clue what's going on there, and I used to be one of those. So that's why we took the direction we went, because for once, these people in Wyoming are now saying, you know what, the guy that I sent to Cheyenne went and did the things that I'm concerned about. And that makes a difference. And, take election integrity, for example. If there's nothing wrong and we add some laws on top of it, as belt and suspenders, they would call it in Cheyenne speak, it doesn't hurt anything. It simply clarifies what we're talking about.
Well, I think a lot of this boils down to very, very conservative issues, or what we might say are conservative issues. You mentioned a couple of them: the ESG investing and the diversity, equity, and inclusion. Most conservatives are pretty well against those things, but in my conversations with Representative John Baer, who is your chairman on appropriations. By the way, I'm going to be talking to him later on this afternoon, and we'll play that interview on Saturday. So I'll talk about some of this with him. But one of the things that I think got lost in the conversation is that it wasn't just what Ken says he heard going door to door, or what Abby Angelos says she heard going door to door. The Freedom Caucus did some polling, actually quite a bit of polling, and the five and dime plan, which those 5 bills, the 5 priorities that you guys had: election integrity, ESG. There were a number of them.
Tax relief,
yeah, the big one. Those were, as I understand it, the top 5 issues that came out of the polling that was done. So these are the 5 things that people are concerned about, and that's what you guys went after. So really, and you just chime in here if you want to, but really, the House of Representatives, in my opinion, was far more responsive to Wyoming citizens than I think any legislature in definitely the recent past.
You said something on a recent show, and I wanted to mention that. This is the first time in the history of Wyoming that we have had a conservative legislature.
That I can find, yeah.
It's never been. You go back and you look at the issues and the people and the things that they did. The famous legislature from 1913, where they were so embittered between the Democrats and Republicans they wouldn't even put their pictures on the same spread. Democrat, the home that I live in, we've talked about this before. The guy that owned that, 3 of the people that owned that were prominent Democrats. John B. Kendrick's right-hand man actually had that house built. And all of these politics basically were around the elites. You had the big ranchers, you had the big oil men, and they traditionally have run Wyoming. And the local guys were out working in the mines, working in the oil patch, cowboying. They didn't really have much of a say. And this is the first time, I think, ever that basically the man on the street has had a voice, and his requests are being heard.
Absolutely. I mean, I continually agree. It was a couple of years ago, I ran into our treasurer, Kurt Meyer. I think it was at a Reagan Day dinner here in Sheridan. And the ESG investing with BlackRock and all that was a hot button issue. I guess it probably still is. Yeah. But I walked up to him and I said, well, Kurt, why are you investing all of our cash with a truly evil corporation? And his response basically was, well, we're looking at it. We're going to take care of that. And I really didn't see any movement on that at all. And so, I think that's still, pretty high up on people's list. And, now, and who knows if the governor's going to sign it or not. Well, now even
BlackRock is backing off themselves because there's been enough pressure from enough states and enough fund managers that a lot of these things are changing. And, from Kurt's perspective, he has his fiduciary responsibility to do the very best that he can. And if you handcuff him, it does make it much more of a challenge. It makes it much more difficult. And quite frankly, several of the fund managers that work with and for him probably wouldn't even be interested. They go make money doing something else for somebody else. So it's not just as clear cut and dry. It says, if you got DEI on your agenda, we're not going to talk to you.
Well, and the
Or
truth,
ESG, excuse me.
yeah, the truth is most companies have some involvement with ESG, and really, I think it's an economic. It's an economic reason why they are, because it's very difficult for a lot of bigger companies to do any sort of business unless they have that stupid ESG statement, or they at least play like they're concerned about environmental, social, and governance.
It's part of playing the game, and fortunately, because the national mood is swinging to the right, that game is changing.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, I've got a couple of other, hot button issues to talk about with our pal Ken Pendergraft. But we'll do that here in just a second. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Concerned about the future of Wyoming, but unsure how to help? Honor Wyoming is giving you the chance to create real, lasting influence. And it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. The Honor Wyoming Bill Tracker is designed to empower Wyoming voters. We're cutting through the noise and equipping you with all the info you need to keep tabs on Wyoming lawmakers, as well as the tools to take action on the issues that matter to you most. Keeping a close eye on key legislation in Cheyenne, we've made it easy to stay informed by providing real-time bill updates and timely take action alerts. Our one-click links make it easy to email key lawmakers at the right time. All you have to do is click and your voice will be heard. Ensuring lawmakers are listening to the people they serve year-round. Protecting the Wyoming way isn't a spectator sport, and voting is only half the story. Get involved today and do your part. With the Honor Wyoming Bill Tracker, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3.
Welcome back to the program. It's Cowboy State Politics, and I'm your host, David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time, a record that nobody in the media should even try to come close to, though I really wish they would. It'd be a big change if we didn't have a bunch of redcoat-loving, lying media running around. And I'm joined on today's program by Ken Pendergraft, representative of House District 29, right?
That's it. We're sitting in my district as we speak.
You know, one of the things I noticed during the legislative session is, and I guess if you pay attention, you have to be down there to see this, but every once in a while, there was some joking around that happened, and one of the funnier ones was, I think it was Jacob Wasserberger who was sitting on the chair, and he mispronounced Representative Marilyn Connolly's name and called her cannoli. Yep. And knowing Representative Connolly, I thought it was entirely appropriate to make fun of her. But now the second time around, Carly Provenza was in the chair, and Marilyn got up to speak, and she says, Representative Cannoli. And I mean, kind of a dig at her, but it was still funny. But that's a joke that happened throughout the session.
Well, Marilyn, actually, I don't know if you were there when she did this, but she ordered
Cannolis,
for everybody and brought them in. And I said earlier in the discussion that you and I live in different worlds. And it's one thing to sit on the rim of the fishbowl and look down in there and watch what goes on. And certainly that's way more valuable than trying to watch the Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
My wife sits up there as well. But being down on the floor is a whole different game.
Absolutely.
And because you have to work with these people, and I will say that a number of them, of people that you might be surprised, would come up to me and say, "Where are you at on this issue? You're not going to speak against it, are you?" Or please don't. Please just, that is part of the fun. And one of the people that came to me and asked for some help was Carly. And I will tell you straight up, Carly is one of my favorite legislators. We agree on almost nothing. She has given some very impassioned talks about abortion or other things that just really irritate me.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have totally different worldviews. But she's honest. And she came out, I don't know if you caught this, she came out when we were talking about the lab school in Cheyenne.
Oh, yeah,
said,
that was very
on that
emotional
bill.
for her.
It was. And she said in front of everybody at the podium, I made a mistake. This is wrong. I can't do this. And I appreciate that. She's a strange piece of work, but I enjoy working with her. I enjoy working against her. There are some others that I really enjoyed. Lee Filer and I had several discussions back in the back because we were back and forth, debating one another. Geringer, I'd see him and, how you doing, Gov?
Yeah, I was going to say, Governor Geringer.
Yeah, how's your campaign going there, Gov? And there is an intake, even with Steve Harshman. I can do it a little bit with Lloyd Larson. Bob Nicholas, not so much, because he pretty much just sat there and sulked this year.
Yeah, he wasn't very happy about anything.
He was very subdued. But it's different, and every now and then you happen to find yourself on the same side. The toughest debate I had all year was against John Baer, and he and I were talking about the Campbell County High School, and we'll just leave that at that.
Well, it's true. Politics makes strange bedfellows, and you may find yourself supporting the same bill as one of the Democrats, or against the bill with one of the Democrats for entirely different reasons.
Yes.
And it's
199
yeah,
was
good
one of
example.
those. I voted no on it simply because, and when it all came together at the end, they had tacked on pre-K. That made it untenable in my book. I'm not going to go there. And as much as I like the idea of universal school, I didn't say that right. I could not vote that way, and so you had people on both sides of the spectrum. And I think that we like to look at it as a linear deal. You're left or you're right. I think it's actually more circular.
Yeah, probably.
And a lot of things are that way. And love and hate, for example. You can't. Those are both very strong emotions, and there might be one thing that'll tip you to one side or the other, but.
Well, I describe it more as a pendulum. It's not linear. That was a good word that you used. Mm-hmm. But it's more of a pendulum. And let me just explain what I mean. A lot of conservatives want the government, as far removed from our daily lives as possible. But at least conservatives, agree that you have to have some government. I mean, you have to have some taxes. I like driving on nice, smooth roads, though some of them are not as smooth as they ought to be. I think it's probably a good idea to have police and fire. And so, some of those things, yeah, you got to spend tax money on. But it is possible to go too far to the right. And if you think about a pendulum, if you push it too hard one way, it ends up flipping all the way around.
Well, now you just made my point.
Yep. And you end up being on the wrong side of things. A good example of this are the really, really wacko libertarians. And, no government at all. And you end up having chaos. Well, we all know where chaos leads. It leads to a clampdown, which is entirely on the left. So anyway, I think it's more of a pendulum than anything. By the way, I forgot to mention that the phone line has been open this entire time. And so if you want to be part of the program, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. If there's something on your mind, a question you want to ask Ken Pendergraft, or you're really ticked off at something he did, go ahead and give us a call. It's 307-374-8989.
Is that the real number?
Yes, that's the real number, my friend.
Okay. I thought maybe you just give them a number.
No. That's the one that actually works. And if you, like I say, if you got a burning question, something you want to talk to Ken or me about, go ahead and give me a call. So a couple of the news articles that are out today, and I've just got a couple of hot button issues here from the Turkey Vulture. They're still claiming that inflation is really just high prices, and we all know that inflation is literally defined as too many dollars chasing too few of goods. So we get too much government money or it's not government money unless it's just printed, too much of our money floating out in the system, and then it drives prices up. And in Cheyenne, Ken, and you and I've talked about this before, that for the average person, when you say something like $1 million or $10 million or $50 million, that's a huge sum of money. And it is.
Inconceivable,
right? But when you get down to Cheyenne and they're talking about numbers like 50 million, 100 million, 500 million. It seems to me that those numbers we thought were big and huge before you got to Cheyenne end up being kind of inconsequential when you get down to Cheyenne. And I guess a good question for you, Ken, is I know before you went to Cheyenne, you and I would talk and say, well, this $50 million, that's a ridiculous amount of money. Well, you're dealing with budgets that are 600 million and 1 billion. And so has your view of the size of the amount, or the I don't know the right word I'm looking for, but the amount of spending changed?
Yeah, let me give an illustration of that. I spent about 4 years living in Germany and driving on the Autobahn. And you might be driving 110, 120 miles an hour. And when you get used to that, it's no different really than driving 60. It is different. But
the crashes are different.
You get kind of recalibrated. It was funny because when we're having these discussions, a lot of times people say something like $300,000. No, you mean 300 million. Move the decimal over 3 spaces and adjust it. But you get used to just working in a larger denomination. And the principle is still there. That's a lot of money. But it's surreal at that point. It really is.
Do you at some point do you get the feeling that okay, well, it's only $1 million we're dealing with, not that big a deal. We can spend $1 million here, no big deal.
30 million really isn't much. The 10 million that went to the now 20 that went to the shooting range thing. That's
become kind of controversial.
Yeah. Anyway,
moving on.
That 10 million, when you're looking at the grand scale of the billions that we deal with, is pretty minuscule.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely incredible, and I'm, my favorite thing to do is sit in the gallery with somebody who has not visited Cheyenne before, and just to sit there and say, okay, now pay attention to this, listen to what they're saying, and invariably, the person that has not sat in the gallery in the Capitol building before will become outraged at one thing or another. A dollar amount or, a vote that they were taking. And, oh, my God, I can't believe they're talking about raising my taxes. That was the lovely Christine's reaction the first time she was down there. In fact, she was pretty infuriated about that. But, a lot of things that happen in Cheyenne, it's easy to kind of armchair quarterback the whole thing. And, often you and I have had the conversation, well, David, it's not that simple. And I said, well, no, Ken, it absolutely is. But the difference is I have the luxury of sitting up here, in my studio and saying, that's conservative, that's not, calling balls and strikes. You, maybe things are a little bit different for you.
Sitting on appropriations, one of the things that we do is all of the agencies come in to take the Department of Health. And they'll bring in 6, 8, 10 people maybe. And they start going through their budget requests. And if you listen to each item and you see that these people care about what they're doing, they really believe they're doing the right thing. And, in the back of your mind, government should not be involved in this at all. But you get kind of caught up in the moment and them doing that, and you can understand why this is important to the person that's bringing it, and that you realize that, right or wrong, these monies that are being spent are affecting people's lives. You take that away, there's going to be, it's like drugs. Somebody shouldn't be on drugs, but they are, and you try to yank them off the drugs, you could kill them. And so you have to, I've likened it to a runaway train. You jump up in the cab of that train, and you got to bring it to a slower stall. You can't just slam the thing on, or you'll derail the train and crash everything. And then they'll say, see, we told you couldn't govern. So it is more complicated than it appears on the surface. And everything is so intertwined. It's just, I love to fly fish. And every now and then I'll make a bad cast into the wind or something and get a little bit tangled up. And you start to untangle it.
It's far more complicated.
Yeah,
than
I just happen to have some more fly line here. I'll just pull it off the reel and put new line on.
All right. Well, it's I think it is absolutely more complicated than than the casual observer realizes. But there again, though, and this will be my pushback, that some things are just right and some things are wrong. And when you look at the Constitution, or you look at the Constitution, what are the roles of government? And there are many things that the government just shouldn't be involved in. Now, the question is, and I think that you brought up a good analogy, well, sometimes you just can't slam on the brakes all of a sudden. And, perhaps one of those things was, and this one didn't pass, but I understand the argument. The reimbursement to counties with the property tax bill. Mm-hmm. A lot of conservatives would say, heck no, we spend enough money as it is. And I kind of tend to be in that group. But really, when you look at the grand scheme of things, and this is not the case, but let's just for instance, let's say a county had to cut 25% of their budget out. That's a big chunk. Mm-hmm. And, if that were a reality, that'd be a serious thing, because there's a lot of programs that you're funding, a lot of employees. In the end, it wasn't that much. It was single digits.
Actual effect to most counties is somewhere around 6%. Someone, But I think of it like this. We sit up there in Cheyenne, and we make a decision that is going to deprive cities, counties, and districts of some of their income. But we're the ones that made the decision. And so to me, the respectful thing to do would be, okay, we made this decision for you.
Right.
It affects you, but we're going to make it affect us. So here's another perspective on that. The monies that are spent in the cities and the counties and the districts, the people that are responsible for spending that are much closer to the people. They're much more approachable. You work with them, you see them day to day. At the state level, not so much. The state also has a much broader budget to look at and find places to make that up. We cut from the governor's recommendation $235 million. That was enough to pay the backfill. And that's why we did it, is if we're going to do that. But we felt like it was our responsibility. If we're the ones making the decision, and we're taking away your money. If you decide to lower your mills or something, you're going to have to figure out how to do that. So that was part of why we fought for the backfill. When it comes right down to it, backfill, probably not really necessary. So some of those hardliners in the Senate, if you want to call them that, they weren't necessarily wrong either. But this goes back to where we started with this conversation, is the core basic principles don't change. But the numbers change and things get complicated. Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and take a call real quick, Ken. We haven't taken one all program. You and I have been running our mouths. So Jerry from Rock Springs, how you doing this morning, Jerry?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Well, what's on your mind? I've got Ken here. You're going to let him have it if you want to.
No, I think this has been a great common sense program. I'm glad to see him on there. That's the main thing I wanted to comment on was this has been an excellent program.
Well, thank you very much.
I appreciate that. Maybe we'll do it a little more often.
Well, that would be good. That would be very good.
All right, Jerry, I appreciate it, my friend. You have a good afternoon. When we come back from the break, we're going to continue our conversation with Representative Ken Pendergraft. We'll wrap up the program in just a second. Christmas is over, and all of the fun holiday cheer has been had. And what are we all left with? Frigid Wyoming weather. Below freezing temperatures that you still have to go out in. That's right, you do have to go back to work at one point or another. And not to scare you, but think about this. Every single morning, you get to scrape the ice off of your windshield. Now, while I can't do anything with that, I can make sure that your feet stay nice and toasty warm while you're doing it. All you have to do is order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. And to get you a pair of them, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy state politics is only going to continue to expand. This program is not going to stop. You can listen to it on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble. Don't forget about the Cowboy State Politics podcast. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. Or if you're a redcoat, it may seem like I'm just not going away, which is absolutely the truth. I'm joined in the studio this morning by Representative Ken Pendergraft. He's been with us all hour. It's been a while since we've been able to do this, Ken. You know, you've got this job down in Cheyenne where you're spending other people's money. I'm just glad we got you out of there, so you can't spend any more of it.
It's not just other people's money I'm spending. It's kind of expensive to live down there where if you eat out.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's The lovely Christine was pretty happy when I came home and, not spending a tremendous amount of money. Hey, I got a call last night from a listener, and they were at I believe it was a school board meeting last night, or a city council, or some meeting up in Ranchester, and Representative Lori Bratton was up there and trying to go through all these property tax bills. And my biggest frustration with this, Ken, is that we have a ton of exemptions. And it just seems like the list is never ending. And I mean, it's really confusing for the average Joe to look at this and say, okay, so what are my property taxes going to be? And I noticed that you've got a sea of papers over there on the other side of my desk. But
yeah, I can't keep it in my head. So.
But some of them, it looks like you've got a breakdown of what the property taxes are actually going to look like in Sheridan County and, kind of some other places. So go ahead.
Statewide, Senate File 69, which we did pass, what it does is it's a permanent thing, so it doesn't go away. If you're already taking advantage of the long-term homeowner exemption, which we got by a year or two ago, then you'd have to pick. You can pick one of these or the other. This exempts 25% portion of your residential property and improved land. Next year, it is limited to owner-occupied residential property. I believe the county offices need a little bit of time to adjust and set that up. And that begins in tax year 2026. There is no backfill, meaning that the cities and the counties don't get anything.
Oh, the horror.
Back, the horror. But if you look at, and I just have Sheridan counties here, this is the general revenue for Sheridan County, $24.9 million. And the reduced property taxes, the amount of that is $1.7 million, or 6.7% of their total budget. It'll affect some things. And, of course, they will pick the things that make it look and hurt the worst.
So we're going to be firing some policemen here?
Yeah, we might have to take all of that $3 million flower pot and scrap the metal out of that.
That's a great example, Ken, because the flower pot, which I've talked about on the program a lot, in fact, it infuriates me, but they spent right around $3 million on it.
Yeah.
$3 million to create something pretty, which I don't even really think that it's that pretty.
It's not.
Maybe it'll change this summer, but whatever, $3 million. Well, the actual impact of Senate File 69 is right around half of that.
Yep.
A little over $1 million. So really, the impact to county, statewide, not that big a deal.
I talked to the president of Sheridan College, Dr. Tribbley, and we figure it'll cost him about 2% of gross revenue.
Okay. There isn't a budget in the world that couldn't absorb 10%, and we're nowhere even close to that.
Yeah. So, and if the People's Initiative passes, you can double that. Now it's at 4%, and it might be about 12% for the city. That's something. You're not just going to walk away from that. But how many of us had to adjust our budgets over the last 4 or 5 years when our property tax nearly doubled?
All of them. Everybody.
Yeah. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander, they say.
Well, I absolutely agree. And, the spending trajectory that this state was on, it is and was absolutely unsustainable. Outside of the appropriations room, you guys had a framed picture. It wasn't a picture. It was a spreadsheet. And it pretty much broke down our financial position as a state.
It's a long-term forecast. And I've got several pages of that if anybody's interested in listening to this, let me know and I can show you those. But they say, okay, if nothing changes, this is where we'll be in 4 years. If the price of oil drops $40 a barrel, just a small fluctuation makes a big difference. And you start looking at how tenuous we are, primarily on the school side. And of course, we're getting sued because we, quote unquote, didn't adequately fund the schools. We pay enough money on education, but it's not being shuffled into the right places, is my view of that. And so this interim, we're going to have a committee, and our good friend Tom Kelly will be sitting on that committee, and they're going to be looking at the basket of goods, we call it, that goes into funding schools, and how can we do that, and then we'll have to pass some bills coming out of that to carry us farther. And it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of that. Wyoming is a little different in that we're constitutionally obligated to fund our schools apparently as much as they want.
For better or for worse. Yeah. Article 7, Section 1. If you ever have any question about who was in control of this state at our founding, it was not conservatives.
No.
And I mean, there's a fascinating story behind that, but yeah, you're absolutely right, Ken. Well, we've pretty much burned up another busy broadcast hour on the program. If you're in Sheridan and you have nothing else to do tonight, or if you want to talk to some of your elected representatives, there's going to be a Patriot Chat. I believe the sign-in is at 6:00 at the Ramada Inn this evening in Sheridan. From what I understand, most, if not all, of our elected representatives are going to be there. So if you got a question for them, if you want to find out why some bills passed, why some didn't, if you're irritated at them, if you want to continue the conversation with Representative Pendergraft, I assume you'll be there tonight.
I plan on it, unless I keel over.
Well, let's not let that happen. Well, Ken, thank you very much for being on the program this morning, and we got to do this more often. Maybe we'll set up something where we can kind of tag team the program here in the future.
That'd make it easier for you, wouldn't it?
It would be. This is a heavy lift every morning. Anyway, we're at the end of the program. If you make sure that you subscribe and follow the program, you can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can always listen to the replay of the live program. Go to the website. There's a link up at the top that says live replay, and you can listen to all of the live programs from days gone by. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.